So now we're going to be hearing from Daan Vink. We've already heard from him earlier in the week, but he's a senior advisor of surveillance and incursion investigation with MPI, and Dan manages the exotic surveillances program and bee pests and diseases as part of his portfolio as well. So he's talking today about mites associated with honeybees, honeybee apis mellifera in New Zealand. Thanks, Dan.
Good afternoon, everyone. You ought to be congratulated, I reckon. I think it's the last session by my reckoning. So you guys are the diehards that are still left standing. So it's great. Can't hear. Okay, I'll stand a bit closer. That better? Okay, right. So I'm a little bit exposed. As Michelle said, I manage the exotic pest and disease surveillance program, but I'm a vet and an epidemiologist originally. And I'm talking to you about mites today, so this is not really something that I know a heap about. When I first acquired this role of managing the pest and disease surveillance program, it was about 2.5 years ago. I had a meeting with Byron and Tony and the Assure Quality apiary officers, and we're doing introductions. And I said, oh, well, I'm an epidemiologist. But I think I must have spoken not very clearly, but in any event, they misheard me and they said that I was an entomologist. And they got visibly excited. And they thought, oh, finally MPI's got a useful one this time. And so I had to say, oh, no, sorry, I'm just an epidemiologist. Oh well. So we'll have to make the most of it. For my penance, I'm talking to you about mites today, so who knows, there might be hope for me yet. And if you're observant, you'll also notice that my name is third in this presentation. This work has really been done by Ching Hai Fan, who's an entomologist and a mite expert at the Plant Health and Environment Laboratories of MPI at Tamaki, Auckland, and Shirley George manages that piece of work. So it's really their work that I'm presenting here today. Undoubtedly, there will be things that I can't talk to very well, but if there's questions that you have that I can't answer, I'm very happy to put you in touch with those people. So just by means of background, we are free of all significant pest mites except Varroa, and we do surveillance every year for other pest mites. You're probably familiar with that. Our apiculture surveillance program has been running since the 1990s. It's very well established. We sample every year, and really the reason we do that is for early detection, but also providing assurance to trade partners that we remain free of these specific pests. So what do we look for? Well, Acarapis woodi, tracheal mite, Tropilelaps, so the Asian mite, Varroa, and all Varroa species that are not Varroa destructor, which is now endemic, as we all know, to our detriment. We also look at small hive beetle, the bee louse or Brola sika, and various non-native bee genetics, which we detect by just looking at the morphology of the bee. So every year we take samples from about 1,400 hives. 320 apiaries are inspected, and all the hives on those apiaries are inspected, and we sample from those hives. There's threefold step, really. Well, first of all, I'll just show you where they are. So there's about 18 of these high-risk sites across New Zealand, which are very much based around areas which we consider high risk for entry of these exotic pests and diseases. Within those, we can use the apiary database to identify the apiaries that are there, and through some proportional allocation and random selection, every year we identify apiaries on which we sample these animals, bees. So it's really an opportunity not just to look for the exotic pests and diseases, but if you're doing this kind of work, you find other stuff, and that's really what we're talking about today. So in terms of what happens at the Plant Health and Environment Laboratory, they wash the bees, wash mites off the bees, and then they do some microscopic inspection on that. They dissect them, looking specifically for tracheal mite, and we also place sticky boards in those hives and look at whatever pops up on those, and it's small hive beetle that we're interested in there. So I won't go through the details of these steps. I don't think it's particularly relevant here, and I couldn't be very knowledgeable in any case. But in terms of washing, you got a pot of bees, you add water, you shake them around, you put them through a couple of sieves, and at a certain type of sieve, you oik them out, put them under the microscope, and see what you've got. Bee dissection. I think Michelle talked about this yesterday. Undoubtedly, she's a dab hand at it. I would love to see it in action. I know how to chop up a cow down to maybe a chicken size, but anything smaller than that gets really tricky, so I'd love to see someone dissect a bee. Sounds like a really tricky job. They do this in the lab, and they look specifically at the trachea for signs of tracheal mite. And then thirdly, in terms of the sticky boards, those are inspected by just putting a grid across them, putting them under a magnifying lamp, looking for large mites and insect, looking at a bit of higher magnification. If anything is seen that looks vaguely suspicious, that area of the board is cut out and a better inspection is done. So what have we found? Well, everything we've been looking for we haven't found, which is really good news. We haven't found any mite pests except for a destructor. We did find a heap of other stuff, and we just thought it was of interest to share that with you today. So really 3 orders of mites, Mesostigmata, Sarcoptiformis, and Trombidiformis, 46 families, 76 genera, and a total of 107 identified mite species over that period of time that this work has been done. So absolute astonishing diversity of mites. And of course, that really begs the question, what sort of mites are they? What do we know about them? And what can we infer from that? Just looking at those different orders, Mesostigmata, we found 15 families. They're along the bottom. You probably won't be able to read them, but that's probably beneficial because they have very long Latin names and they mean nothing to me, but I see Michelle avidly looking, and so I'm sure some of this will be published. Quite a lot of diversity, really. So within those 15 families, we found a total of 53 different species, so a lot of diversity of these Mesostigmata mites. Here's some photos. We see Varroa on the left with a very typical shape, which we undoubtedly recognize. One of the Amarosidae family mites is on the right there. We can see they've got quite a different morphology. They're more elongated and oval. The position of the legs and the mouth parts are different. If you're going to be distinguishing between these different species, again, I'll put you in touch with Dr. Fan because he might give you some information on how that's done. To me, these are pictures which are attractive, and they show that there is this diversity. More of these, again, different species that have been detected, and even more, Lapidae left and right. Sarcoptiformis, we found even more different families, 19 of them, but slightly lower number of species, and many of those were Acaridae, so a little less, more diversity, but less species within family. And again, Carpoglyphidae on the right, and Acaridae on the right, on the left, and Acaridae on the right. Trombidiformis we found in relatively smaller quantities, only 12 families, only 20 species. And here's a picture of them. So what does that mean? When we put all that together? Altogether, we found 20 Mesostigmata, 3 Sarcoptiformis, and 5 Trombidiformis species which had not been described in New Zealand before. So that's 28 new species, or undescribed species, I should say. So it sort of conforms to the adage, if you're going to be looking, you're going to find. And really, the question then is, what does this mean? Well, these mites have all been identified from hives which have not been showing any signs of any exotic disease. So it does seem that they are present but don't cause any disease, which is what we really are interested in at the end of the day. I did a bit of digging in the literature, and there is surprisingly little of it, and you have to go back quite a long time to find anything that's particularly useful. I did discover that there's generally 3 groups of hive-associated mites. You've got your parasitic mites, which are fairly well described. You've got your phoretic mites, which I think are plant-associated mites. They're called often designated as hitchhikers because they'll hop on a bee, take a ride, hop on another, and find another plant to go and live on. And then you've got house guests. And I think the house guests must be analogous to the kind of mites that we have in our households that live in our carpets and the mattresses of the beds we sleep on, that live off detritus and the like. So the one publication that was useful was from de Jong in 1982, and he puts a table up there of 2 pages with a huge, massive list of different species, and they note that most of the species in Table 2 have been rarely collected and are of no ecological or practical concern, as their usual hosts or habitats do not involve apis. So in a sense, what we've got here is an incidental finding. It's just results that have been determined as we've been doing the work as part of our exotic pest and disease surveillance. It shows that we do find a lot of stuff. It's all not negative, but it doesn't really appear to have any major or any impacts or significance for bee health. You can think about that in a little bit further detail. We think that these mites are commensals. They live in and around hives. They don't cause any damage. They don't cause any harm. They might actually have a beneficial relationship and certainly don't cause disease. Thinking about what impacts might be there, well, we know that Varroa vector for viruses, and that's well recorded. And so the question may be, well, what about these mites? Maybe these mites could do something similar. Maybe these mites could also be implicated in spread of viruses. We think it's a bit unlikely because Varroa also punch bloody great holes in bees and inject them with viruses, and these mites certainly don't seem to do that. So they may spread some virus around, but we don't. The bottom line is we simply don't know what their significance is. It's not likely to be absolutely massive. I found a reference that says that these mites are unlikely also to impair the efficiency of the bees, so they don't impair pollinator efficacy or production in any way. And it's quite well possible that, in fact, they have a strong and potentially beneficial role in the hive. They clean up a lot of detritus, and they perform a positive function. And I think the bottom line here is really that we do understand and we do know that these hives, the colonies, are incredibly intricate and complex social systems and organized communities. But beyond that, I think there's increasing evidence to see that hives are not just that, they're whole ecosystems in themselves. It's not just the one insect species, the bee, that we're concerned with. There's potentially dozens of different mice species that might be living in any one hive, and undoubtedly lots of microscopic organisms as well. It's all part of the big ecosystem that is the hive, and that I think with the kind of new work that we're developing, looking at bee health and determinants of bee health, that they may play a role in. But certainly that it's very complex and very multifactorial. So it does go some way to underline some of the stuff we already are aware of, but just interesting. So if you have a specific interest in this, there's some references up there. And as I mentioned, if you do have any specific questions that I won't be able to answer here on the spot, then we'll put you in touch with Dr. Fan. But for the meanwhile, I thank you for your attention, and that's it.